Welcome everybody to Linux Academy. My name is Terry, and over this course we will be covering all things Linux, introduction to installation and setup. So in this video for Intro to Linux, we're going to talk about gaming on Linux. And gaming on Linux is something that in the past has been anywhere from difficult to impossible to do. Fortunately, in recent months, or in the last year, a lot of progress has been made in terms of gaming for Linux. So let's go ahead and update our operating system here. And we're going to be, actually for a change of pace, rather than using a virtual machine to talk about gaming in Linux in this video, we're going to be using my Linux desktop, my personal Linux desktop. It's going to be a lot easier to show anything that might be going on, and I've already got all of the major packages installed. So, for gaming in Linux, one of the first things that you'll need to make sure that you have available is proprietary third-party graphics drivers for either ATI or NVIDIA. Your mileage is definitely going to vary if you happen to be stuck with using drivers for Intel. Now, Intel does have accelerated video driver support in Linux, but again, your mileage may vary, and in all honesty, if you're not running ATI or NVIDIA, that's probably not a gaming system. In my case, I happen to have an ATI 7850 2 gigabyte ATI graphics card. And on this card, as you can see, when I bring up the ATI Catalyst Control Center, which is the same thing that you would see in Windows, I happen to have 3 monitors. I've got 2 Dell 24-inch monitors and a 27-inch monitor, high-resolution monitor in the center. Our video is recording off of this third monitor over here, or monitor number 2. So the display manager, I have all of my 3D settings that are available, but you'll typically allow your game to set your 3D settings. You'll set things like anti-aliasing, etc., inside your game, based on how graphically intensive it is and the kind of card that you have. So again, I've got an ATI 7850, and this is my Catalyst Control Center. Now, how do I run? Still, unfortunately, the vast majority of games are Windows-based. Well, there's a number of ways that we can run Windows games in Linux. And as we went through in the Office video, we can use Wine. Now, Wine will run a large number of games, including the most popular game in the world, which would be World of Warcraft. So one of the things that we can do if we go to winehq.org is we can look in the AppDB, and it'll tell us what games, or what applications in general, but specifically what games will be supported by Wine. And you'll see that World of Warcraft is the top one. StarCraft happens to work. Guild, StarCraft 2 Retail happens to work. And they're all supported in what they call different levels, from bronze, which means it installs and kind of works, to silver, meaning it works but it has issues. Gold, it mostly works all the way up through playing with some video artifacts perhaps, but platinum means once you get it installed, the game will work perfectly fine. You'll see that the top 10 lists for almost every one of these categories are games. So we can use Wine. We can also use software that relies on Wine called Play on Linux. And Play on Linux is, you do have to have Wine installed, but it's a third-party utility that you install on top of it. And what it does is it sets profiles for Windows games so that the configurations that happen to work for any particular Windows game can be downloaded and reviewed on your system. So here's what Play on Linux looks like. So Play on Linux allows you to install a game via Wine, and it'll update profiles that are available. Now, Play on Linux doesn't just mean games. It will allow you to install browsers, development IDEs, anything that it can support or find a profile for. And it can be found on playonlinux.com. So now that we've gone ahead and let it update, it pulls down the profiles for all of these commercial games that are available, and we can click on any number of profiles here, whether it was testing, the no CD needed, but these are commercial. So all of these games have profiles associated with them that will allow them to install and run using Play on Linux. Now, to be clear, you can get all of these to run using plain old Wine. And Wine is, as we saw before, is what Play on Linux will use to run these games. But the profiles, the specific settings that allow them to run optimally, are what Play on Linux gathers for us here. Okay, so that's games, graphics, internet, multimedia. It will tell you any of these that are available. And for anybody who's curious, GOG is a website that uses older or out-of-support games that you may have played in the past that you can buy generally for pretty cheap. They have pretty good sales. Not really Steam, since they don't install a client that you download from, but you can get Neverwinter Nights or any of these games available, and they tend to be older games. So the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at good old Steam. And as everybody is more or less familiar with, if you are a gamer, is that Steam runs just fine on Windows and on Mac OS X. But recently, it now runs on Linux. Now, unfortunately, not all games have been ported to Linux, and in fact, you'll notice that not a lot of what I would call A-quality or latest and greatest games are available for Linux. But there's still a pretty decent amount of Linux games that are available, and indie game producers generally produce quite a few of them. I do have Half-Life, Left 4 Dead, Surgeon Simulator, Serious Sam, some games that you've probably heard of, but you can go to the store and you can specifically look at just Linux games that are available. They've got a special section of them here. Steam installs perfectly fine in Ubuntu. It also installs okay in Fedora if you convert the Debian package to RPM, and any other Debian-based distributions, the package installs just fine. So as you can see, there's a number of ways to play games in Linux now, whether it's native using a client like Steam, or using Wine backend with a front-end client application like Play on Linux for optimization. We've come a long way in a short period of time. My name is Terry for Linux Academy, brought to you by Pinehead TV.